Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this webinar around landing your first role in e-commerce. I'm going to give a little sec because everyone's connecting to audio, I can see. So thank you for joining us. If you've just joined in, make sure you get involved in the chat. That's the beauty of being here live as opposed to waiting for the recorded version, is being able to interact in person. So feel free on the chat in the right-hand side or wherever you've got it set up to ask your questions in there as we go. I prefer to have these webinar sessions as much more interactive as possible. Makes it more interesting for me and you get the most out of it. So do that. Also, I'd love to hear from you what kind of careers and what kind of roles you're looking to land in e-commerce as we go, so I can tailor the conversation to you. All right, let's get into it. I'm assuming you're here because you want to know how to get started or how to accelerate your career in e-commerce. We won't waste any time. Before we do, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we gather here to connect and learn on. Although virtual, we join from our homes and our offices, which are part of a land with a very deep and a very rich history. We acknowledge the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the traditional custodians of the land upon which we meet. We pay respects to the elders of the past, present, and future, and acknowledge their spiritual and historical connection to country. Never more important than ever, especially being NAIDOC week this week. Okay, so before we get in, I'll give you a little bit of an overview on me. If you have not met me, my name is Nathan Bush. I'm a director at eSuite Talent. But before that, I have a long history in e-commerce. I was Super Retail Group, which owns Rebel, BCF, Supercheap Auto, and others, heading up their digital and e-commerce for 6 years, where we grew the e-commerce business from $4 million to $140 million. I've been in the top 50 people of e-commerce in Australia 4 years in a row. And I host my own podcast called Add to Cart, which I've had the pleasure of having a heap of brilliant Australian e-commerce entrepreneurs and leaders in. So if you are looking for inspiration or even connections in the industry, make sure you check out the Add to Cart podcast. All those conversations are up on addtocart.com.au as well. All right, so we are here to talk more about what we're offering at eSuite and what we do at eSuite to help people get their careers in e-commerce. So at eSuite, we have three main parts to our business, and we do recruitment. So we help some brilliant brands in Australian retail build their teams in e-commerce. And obviously that's something we would love to help you with, whether that is now or in the future as you're building your career. We also do consulting, helping leaders in the industry work out what their team should look like, how to structure it, some of the processes that they should use. And what we're here to talk about today is training. And it's a relatively new part of our business, which we've launched this year. And it's all about, for us, about developing more talent in Australian e-commerce, because as I'm sure you are aware, there's no easy way to get into e-commerce. And we want to make that change so that there is a definite path for your career in e-commerce. Some of the retailers that we are working with currently include the likes of Oz Hair and Beauty, Domino's, Lorna Jane. You can see the logos. We are so lucky to have amazing clients that we're working with every day and constantly putting some great candidates into these companies to accelerate their e-commerce career. So today, what we're going to talk about is the e-commerce opportunity. Where is it at in Australia currently? Let's talk a little bit about what e-commerce is and what the market size is, because it's a really exciting time in e-commerce. Then we're going to turn our attention to your e-commerce career. And I'm going to give you some tips and some insights from what we're seeing in the market right now, and tips to you if you are early in your e-commerce career or looking to get started, what we would recommend to you to really get your foot in the door. And the third thing we'll talk about is our e-commerce Accelerator, which is our program kicking off in August to help people upskill in e-commerce, but also land their first e-commerce job. Especially important if you are a student, recently graduated or soon to graduate, because we have 20 free sponsored student spots available in that upcoming program. And if that's of interest to you, we'd love to see if we can place you in there. And then we'll keep some time for Q&A. But like I said, don't wait until Q&A. If you've got questions, comments, please add them to the chat. It will make it a much more enjoyable experience, and you'll get more benefit out of being here live. All right, the e-commerce opportunity. So as a definition of e-commerce, it can be a range of things. And I'm sure if you've spoken about e-commerce to people, even if they shop online, when you say e-commerce, a lot of people don't actually know what it is. And it amazes me all the time when I talk about being in e-commerce that people don't know what it is. And it's not just old people, it's everyone. They don't really understand what it is as an industry. And if we look at these three definitions from some really leading companies in e-commerce, it's actually pretty simple, right? So the common traits around what makes up e-commerce is the buying and the selling. So it's a marketplace, it's a retail business. It's about goods and services. You've got to have some sort of product at the end of it. It doesn't necessarily have to be a tangible product, but some sort of product that you're selling. And it's got to be conducted online or on the internet. So there's three really like easy definitions in there to show what makes up an e-commerce business. Now, obviously, over the last couple of years, we've seen this blow out into all sorts of different forms, whether that be shopping via social, live stream shopping, the metaverse. This all gets blown out into multiple things, not just your typical buying on the website. And as we've seen, the rise of mobile shopping as well. But at the core of it, these three elements remain the same. And one of the reasons we started e-commerce is that we see a big difference between e-commerce and digital. And sure, e-commerce is digital at the core, but we see a lot of people going into digital and going, yeah, I know e-commerce. But if you really look at what e-commerce is, it's a retail business, not so much digital. Digital empowers being able to sell online, but it's only one small element of what an e-commerce business is. And we'll cover more of this later. So if we look at what e-commerce has done and the rise of e-commerce. So as of April 2021, and it definitely is bigger now, e-commerce was a $50.5 billion industry in Australia. And look at that spike. If you look at that January 20 spike, that's obviously COVID, where COVID's kicked in, and e-commerce had a huge uptake during COVID and had growth, which was, took the industry forward so much. It was already growing year on year, but COVID was really the kick. And it's now really, really exciting time to be in e-commerce. We're also seeing a little bit of a come down as physical stores open. E-commerce now has to actually fight for that growth. And we need to make sure that, that we are really putting our best foot forward in e-commerce, because we're not just going to get that COVID kick along that we've had over the last couple of years. And in terms of that acceleration, I love this quote from KPMG. So after experiencing 5 years of e-commerce growth in a matter of months, and remember, this is early 2020 when the pandemic kicked in, retailers and brands need to leapfrog their investment programs to deliver their 2025 plan today. So there are lots of stats out there around what COVID did. The most common ones is that COVID accelerated the e-commerce industry. It did basically 7 to 8 years worth of growth in a couple of months, which is phenomenal when you think about it from all parties, what that means. And from a business perspective, you've got retailers there who are now going, oh, this is really serious. We need to get on top of e-commerce, because a lot of the times they were plodding along going, yes, we'll get to it, but it's not as important as our overall retail business. But this acceleration has meant that they've had to pay plenty of attention, which means that there are so many opportunities for you and so many opportunities that are going to open up in the e-commerce space. In terms of new online shoppers, this is the stat that I love the most, is that we had 1.36 million households shopping for the first time online in 2020. So if we think about, we're a nation of 10 million households, to have more than 10% shopping online for the first time during COVID, that presents a phenomenal opportunity for both brands and yourselves to kickstart your e-commerce career. The trick is now, like we said before, is making sure that we take those customers that shopped online for the first time and give them a great experience and keep pushing that experience forward. And so this is where it comes into play for you, is that even though we've had this incredible growth in e-commerce, there is a shortage of skills out there. As recruiters, we find it every day. We have what we call at the moment, it's a candidates market, in that in Australia, we're an island and we had borders closed for a long time. And for many years, we had talent coming into Australia from overseas markets that were more advanced. COVID shut that off. And it meant that we were going through this huge uplift in growth in e-commerce, but without the talent growth to support it. And that's what we're really passionate about at eSuite, is making sure that we don't just move the same people around the roles in the industry. We want to make sure that we help bring new people into the industry as well, because there is so much opportunity there. So I love this quote from Paul Zara, who's the CEO of Australian Retailers Association, where he says that there's an acute skills shortage within the technology and digital area, which presents another unfortunate growth barrier to retailers looking to leverage their fantastic e-commerce gains from the pandemic. So that's obviously, from a retail perspective, is that they can't grow without the right people. But if we spin that around and look at it from a candidate or someone looking to get into the e-commerce industry for the first time, a massive opportunity for you, in that you've got so many retailers and suppliers to retailers saying, we need talented people to help keep up with the growth. So there's never been a better time to kickstart your career in e-commerce. All right, so let's go into the second part of today. And this is about your e-commerce career and some insights in what we're seeing day to day doing the recruitment for the likes of the brands that you saw before. Now, if I think about my career in e-commerce, I typically see people come into e-commerce from one of three areas. Because like I said, there is no typical path into e-commerce. You would have seen it yourself. There's no university degree that says, finish this and you become an e-commerce expert. You can become a doctor, you can become a marketer, you can become a lawyer, but there's nothing that says you can become an e-commerce expert. So we typically find that people fall into e-commerce in one of these three areas. So we see people come from a marketing background. So they have worked in marketing, typically digital marketing, where they're managing things like paid Google ads or social advertising. They're great at content, potentially, great at creating websites, all that sort of stuff that comes with a marketing lens, really great at branding. And then they fall into an e-commerce brand and they do that for an e-commerce company. Then, that's typically their path into e-commerce. We also see people come from a technology point of view. So for a long time there, setting up an e-commerce website wasn't easy, right? Because there was nothing off the shelf and you had to be a bit of a nerd to make it happen. And we find that there's still that path into e-commerce where you've got people who specialize in developing websites, coding websites, doing the integrations between all the different elements. And that is definitely a path into e-commerce that we see often. And that's especially important when we're dealing with businesses that have proprietary or custom systems, that those technology skills are so important. As you might know, is that in the last, say, 5 years, we've had platforms like Shopify come out, which has made that barrier, that technology barrier, a lot easier to start your own e-commerce business. And it's taken that edge off you having to be really highly technical to have a career in e-commerce. And the last one that I would say that we often see people coming to e-commerce from is what we call the operator. And the operator, if I was to compare it to anyone, would be your typical store manager. So if you think about a physical shop, every shop usually has a store manager, the person responsible for making sure budgets are hit, that customers have a great experience, that stock is available, all that sort of stuff. We see the same person coming through into e-commerce. And these roles are really important. And, having that ability that, not looking at e-commerce just as, hey, if I get all this traffic in from a marketing perspective, or if I have all the technology working, but this person looks at it and goes, okay, how do we make this business work? What's the profit and loss look like? What are our margins? Are we retaining our customers? What's the fulfillment experience? Looking at it end to end and being responsible for making sure that that business is profitable. So traditionally, they come in from a more traditional retail perspective, but you'll see them come about being an e-commerce store operations manager or something of the like. But three very different backgrounds there that we have going on, all which come into an e-commerce career. That's typically where we see people come from. But we want to make a much more straightforward path into e-commerce. So if I look at a common e-commerce career pathway, this is what we typically see. And don't be confused by how linear this is. It's never as linear as it looks here. But typically we see people starting off as an e-commerce coordinator. And for many of you, especially if you're just coming out of university at the moment, this is probably the landing point. The original landing point is coming in as an e-commerce coordinator. And you're typically looking around that 40 to 60K mark, probably higher to 50 to 60K at the moment, pushing up into 65. With the COVID increase. But the e-commerce coordinator is essentially a support role. And you'll see a coordinator do everything from product data management, making sure all products are uploaded, the data is right, answering customer queries, making sure that content is uploaded, that it's formatted correctly. It's a really, really great training ground across all the elements of e-commerce, a really important role too. Next, we see e-commerce specialists. So usually after 1 to 2 years as an e-commerce coordinator, we start seeing people go, great, I get this e-commerce thing and I'm really enjoying it. I want to specialize in a particular area now. So this might be, say, product management, making sure that we have the right products on site, that we're stocked up, that we're bringing in new product all the time. It could be in paid performance marketing. So really making sure there's Google AdWords budgets are humming, that we've got social spend happening, that we're getting great return on that. Could be that, hey, I like design. I like the design and the UX element of this. We start seeing people go down rabbit holes and go, I really want to specialize here. And that's a really exciting time in your career, I think. And we see those ranges from 60 to 90K. And typically e-commerce specialists are in high demand where there are larger e-commerce teams. If you're going into a relatively founder-led business, which might have under 20 teams, under 20 people, they may not have specialists. It may be you get in there and you have to do everything. But as you get into the more corporate environment, specialists become really important and have a really direct task to do. And you get to hone those skills really well and become an expert in that area. Then we typically see e-commerce specialists get to a point where they go, I feel like I've kind of mastered that. I want to go to the next level and I want to be able to be responsible for that end-to-end experience. And we call that an e-commerce manager, probably the most common title of any that you'll see here. And e-commerce managers can range anywhere between 80 and 160K. It's a really wide gap. And I know that's probably not helpful, but it all depends on what kind of company it is, how much responsibility it is, where they're located. It starts to get a bit blurry here, but typically an e-commerce manager is the person responsible for running the store. And this is end to end. So we're not just talking about what the website looks like. We're talking about what the customer experience is, what the delivery looks like, how we're going to acquire new customers, what products we're bringing in. They're responsible for the whole lot. Usually an e-commerce manager is also managing people. So managing that team of specialists and coordinators with them to make sure that they're really driving the direct way, because you'll start getting a little bit of strategy in here. Not a lot. You probably won't be responsible for the whole strategy, probably more still in the execution phase, but you're starting to think about those things. Then we move into, say, a leadership position, which is a head of e-commerce or a GM of e-commerce. Again, more typical in the larger organizations, but at this level, anywhere from 140K plus, can range up to 300K typically. But then you also starting to work for bonuses and incentives at this level because you are rewarded based on how successful you are in that position. And those bonuses can be anything from hitting targets to being able to share in the percentage of profits based on what kind of business you're in. Really exciting place to be because at that point, you're really leading the strategy of the e-commerce team and making sure that you've got your eye on the future to go, okay, great, this is changing. This is what we've got to change about our business and the way we've got to move forward. Making those calls around what do you do and what do you leave behind, which is often the hardest thing in e-commerce because there's so much that you can do. This person has to have enough experience to know, hey, I know we could go here, but this opportunity is much bigger. We're going to have to leave behind this one. So really critical roles. You'll sometimes see that role also as a head of or a GM of marketing or customer. Not always as clear cut as head of or GM of e-commerce. So that's a really linear e-commerce career pathway. However, there are so many zigzags in between and so many different ways you can go. These are all the different types of e-commerce titles and roles that we've been working with lately. And so you can see here, nothing in there is as linear and they don't always fit that direction. So you've got everything from a merchandise director, someone who's responsible for taking the product that's been bought and committed to and making sure that it is seen the right way on a website using things like filtering, sorting, grouping. And that's a really specific role through to things like a creative copywriter, making sure that every bit of copy on a website or even on packaging forms or on emails is really, hitting the mark. And we've got things like project managers where people come in just to work on specific projects, which could be things like, hey, we need to develop a website. And the team that we've got working on the website right now, we can't distract them with this new thing that we're building over there. So we need to bring people in just to work on this project. And they can be really exciting roles as well. You can see here a bunch of other kind of titles. I get really excited when I start seeing TikTok in the title. I think it's really great when companies move quickly to take advantage of those new channels and those new mediums. But you can see how wide and far your career can go. So I think because it's e-commerce, don't think you have to go in that linear fashion. Is that know that e-commerce is retail, and that at the end of the day, it needs to be profitable and it needs to be sustainable and scalable. But your contribution to that e-commerce success can come in so many different ways, and there's so many different areas you can specialize in. More than happy if anyone wants to. I think we'll have a little bit of time left over. If anyone sees any of these roles and goes, hey, what is that? Leave a note in the comments and we can talk more about them at the end. So where do you start? So with all those avenues available to you, the people that we see really succeed especially coming from no experience or coming from university into an e-commerce career, the ones that we see really hit the mark with brands wanting to take them on kind of hit 5 areas. And I'm going to go through each and give a couple of examples. So really important in e-commerce is that you're a self-starter. And a little tip here is that no one in e-commerce has anything figured out. So everyone's learning constantly in e-commerce. So being curious and always looking for new ways is so important. There's no playbook, there's no guidebook available to you. You've often got to find answers yourself and take the initiative. So Google is often your best friend. So if you can show that, hey, no worries, give me a problem and I will sort it out. I'll find a way. I'll come up with multiple options for you. But honestly, it is just getting in there and giving it a go straight away. So being a self-starter and being self-guided is so important because retail is just a massively busy industry. And as sexy as some of the brands look, most brands are under-resourced. And you'll get into retail teams and they do not have a hell of a lot of time. So being a self-starter and showing that you can make progress yourself is really important. The second thing I've got there is being able to be immediately on the tools. So as part of our accelerator, we have some optional extras about taking a Shopify course or a Google Analytics course. And I think if you're looking to enter a retailer, either as your first role or even an internship, being able to show that you can add value straight away without having to be mentored, without having to have someone sit over your shoulder is so important, because retailers can immediately go, great, come into our organization and I know that you can do something straight away. So great examples of that is, say, if you are looking for your first role, download Shopify, set up a Shopify site, even if you're not actually activating it, selling it, and learn how to say upload products. Know where customers will come through. Experiment with some apps. It will cost you under $100 to do all of that. It's the best training that you can ever have to get hands-on with some of the platforms that these retailers are using every day. Same as Google Analytics. There's not one, I will safely say there are not many, if any, retail businesses who aren't using Google Analytics. So, and that's all available to you for free, including some great courses on Google Analytics. So get in and learn Google Analytics. They have dummy data in there for you to play around. So if you can go to a retailer and go, hey, I know I'm fresh, I know I'm starting out, but I can upload products on Shopify and I can do some reports and some insights on Google Analytics, that's a great start. You're offering value straight away. The rest you'll learn on the job. Third one, can communicate effectively. I think that goes for most jobs. However, in e-commerce, you will find that you are getting hit with requests and ideas left, right, and center. And that will include from the phone, from Slack, from email, all over the place. It's really important that you are one piece of the cog here. So being able to communicate with those around you in terms of what you're working on, the ideas you have, really showcase. You can't just, there's some people who have the idea that I can go into e-commerce, put my headphones on, knuckle down for 8 hours, and then come out at the end of the day. It doesn't work like that. The best people in e-commerce are great communicators, work in teams, and get their shit done at the same time. So really important to hone that. Fourth one there, show enthusiasm. I think any business where you come in and you say, I love e-commerce and I'm so excited about the future of e-commerce for reasons A, B, and C. And hey, I can see all these great opportunities for your brand in e-commerce. That goes 90% of the way. Brands are just looking for people who live and breathe e-commerce, especially if you can put the lens of it from a new shopper's perspective. Because keep in mind that a lot of retailers looking to advance in e-commerce may have a more traditional outlook on retail. So if you can come with a fresh perspective on e-commerce and a passion for it, that is a brilliant start. And the last thing I would say is that it's very probably Gen X of me, but show that you want to be there long term. Because if you think about it from a retailer's or a brand's perspective, if you're coming into their organization and they're going to spend the time training you up and developing you, being able to show that you want to be there long term gives them that bit of comfort that they go, great, we can put all the effort and all the resources into helping you develop your skills. And we think that, hey, the payoff might not be in the next 12 months, but over the next 3, 4, 5 years, you're going to become a really, really valuable part of the team. So if you can show that you want to be part of that team long term and really want to develop your career there. All right, so that's all great, but then how do you actually upskill yourself? So this is an old model. It's called the 70-20-10 model. And it's something that we use at eSuite. It's something I've used throughout my career. It's not an eSuite model. It's very well known. But when people think about upskilling themselves, the first question that I always get asked is, what course should I do? When in fact, that should be the last question you ask yourself. A course is not the answer to upskilling, which probably works against our favor because we've got a great course that we want you to do. But at the same time, it's a piece of the puzzle. So if we look at the 70-20-10 rule and break it down, you can get started with this straight away. So 70% is learning from experience. And essentially, this is what you're trying to do. You're trying to get your foot in the door of a retailer or a brand so you can get that experience. So these are daily activities and projects which stretch you beyond your comfort zone. So these are the day-to-day things that we do every day in our job that we go, oh, I haven't done this before. I wonder how I do it. And you actually learn by doing those things and stretching yourself further. So yes, you can wait until you're in an organization to do that, but you can also do those activities that I mentioned earlier, starting your own Shopify site, running freelance jobs, saying yes to things that really stretch you and make you learn on the job. And hopefully, especially if it's freelance, learning while getting paid for doing them. So think about those opportunities that you've got in front of you right now, where you can put your hand up and say, yes, I'll do that. And then you learn on the job and make that happen. That's your learning from experience. Then we've got 20% learning from others. So this is the continual learning you get from broadening who you interact with. And we've got a beautiful thing in the Australian e-commerce industry, which you'll hear on Add to Cart, is we have such an open and sharing community in e-commerce. And once you're in, you'll realize how accessible everyone is and how keen everyone is to share their knowledge. So the sooner you can be part of that community, the better. And there are some really simple things to do there. So like I said, listening to podcasts, working out the who's who of retail is really important. At the end of this webinar later today, you're going to get a little cheat sheet that we're going to send out to you. And it's going to have some great resources that if you subscribe to and keep an eye on, you'll quickly work out who are the mentors and the people in e-commerce that you want to keep an eye on and keep learning from. You might want to attend conferences and meetups as well. So you can get started on this straight away. And I would say, it's a great chance to secure a job just being here and showing, remember we talked about enthusiasm, showing up at these things. You don't have to be in retail to show up. You can just show up. So for example, if you're in Sydney, next month Online Retailer is on, and it's actually free to go to the expo floor on that, where you'll see over 100 solution partners to e-commerce and lots of people in e-commerce sharing what they're doing. If you are on that floor, understanding who's who, talking to people, that's going to be a great way into e-commerce and learn there. And the last 10% I've got is formal training. Really important structured programs or courses that develop your skills in particular areas. And ignore my dot points there. They obviously haven't been updated, but I would say things like being able to do courses. So whether that is the eCommerce Accelerator, which I'll give you more information on, or it's things like the Google workshops, the Google Analytics courses online, or things that are a little bit left of center. So it could be a UX course that's not necessarily e-commerce related, but you can bring those skills into e-commerce. All great things. But again, making sure that you don't just rely on formal training saying, yes, I did it. I've got 3 certificates. I'm ready for e-commerce, because it's a tiny portion of upskilling and being ready for e-commerce. All right, the Accelerator. So we've put together the Accelerator to help people get to upskill in e-commerce. And originally the idea came about because of that, there's no pathway from university into e-commerce businesses. And we wanted to create that pathway for students. It's since expanded, and we have teams from retailers joining us, as well as service providers. So it's a really great mix of people. But we have 20 free spots available for recent graduates or soon to graduates available for each intake. And so they're normally $1,950. We have 20 free spots available for you. So this is why I want to share what we're doing here. So the e-commerce Accelerator is a 10-week online course. I lead it. Each week we have live classes as well as a portfolio assignment and there's over 20 cheat sheets available for you to take away. But it's about teaching the foundations of e-commerce. So we go right across the e-commerce customer journey, from marketing to finance and pricing, strategy and tactics, customer experience, technology and data, analytics, reporting, fulfillment, and future trends. So if you're thinking about e-commerce as great, I can run a few ads and I've got an e-commerce business, we're showing that, hey, there's a lot more pieces putting this together. We want to give you the foundations of what e-commerce looks like. Even if you go away and specialize in your own area, you know all the areas that can impact that. I want to call out particularly finance and pricing. Most students groan when they see that, because especially if they've had that experience at university where they've flunked the accounting subjects, which I did. But it's a really important thing to get your head around, is how an e-commerce business remains profitable. If you get that concept straight away, you are setting yourself up for success down the track. So 9 modules over 10 weeks. We have a final portfolio assignment at the end. So throughout all of this, you get to study a retailer of your choice. We leave it totally up to you, and you build your portfolio over those 10 weeks to the point where at the end, you're able to develop a really, really compelling pitch for a solution to a problem that you see that this retailer can take on. Now, what I will say about the course is that while we have loads of content in there, there's about 650 slides, 25 cheat sheets, 18 hours of material in our live classes. We always had the intention that this course is not the learning of all the facts in e-commerce. There is absolutely no way that I can teach you all the facts of e-commerce, and I would never intend to, because they will change in another 6 months. So we're not teaching you all the facts. We definitely dive into subjects and the intricacies of it, but it's more about training you how to think about e-commerce. So let's think about things critically. Let's look at new solutions, new ways of working to really open up your e-commerce career, rather than trying to follow a bouncing ball. Because if you follow the bouncing ball will be out of date really soon. But if we can give you the foundations to think critically about e-commerce and take that initiative to the next level, that's what we're aiming for. So this is what it looks like over 10 weeks. So you can see here that every module is there. We have a study break in between, and then we have our final portfolio right at the end. I will say that we have structured this to be 100% remote. So there is live classes every Tuesday morning that go for 2 hours. Those live classes, if you can't make them, they are recorded and then uploaded into our portal, which you can access at any time. Then we have a portfolio task, as I mentioned, which could take you between 1 to 2 hours a week, but you can do that anytime in the week, due on the Sunday. And that's the extent of it. You can, of course, there's a whole bunch of other resources in there. You can go as far as you want, but if you had 3 or 4 hours a week to commit to this, you will get through and have a really, really high quality output at the end. In our first intake, and this was earlier this year, so it ran from March to June, we had a phenomenal response, but we had 96 people go through the eCommerce Accelerator, and we had such a range of people. We had people from organizations including Maya, Roses Only, Beginning Boutique, Cotton On, Barbecues Galore, as well as individuals who put themselves through it, who put their hand up and said, I want to upskill myself, even if my employer won't. I'll upskill myself in terms of helping me get that next job. And then we had 9 students who secured a sponsored student placement, who did not pay for that, but were able to come in and mix it with everyone that you see here. So it's phenomenal, because what we have is we have live classes, which are very interactive. And we also have a community where we have people sharing their experiences in e-commerce. So you have this great mixture of people who have been in e-commerce or retail for a long time, as well as the fresh perspective of students and people new to the industry, all coming together, working towards a common goal of that final portfolio. So for me, if I was a student, I would be looking at this going, the content's great and I'll learn a lot through the content, but the connections that you will make out of the accelerator are much, much more valuable than the content. So we've got some student testimonials. I'm going to leave them here because they're a bit lengthy, but we had great response from our students, and you can see them there. Basically what we had is I was blown away by how good some of our recent university graduates were in that final submission. Of the final submission, we had 52 students graduate. Of these, 14 are what we call our top performers, and that's the top 20%. Of the 14, they didn't all come from those big e-commerce or retail companies. We had 3 that were actually students. So and they were compared exactly the same. So we had students coming through the course showing that they could mix it with the best in the business already. And that was really exciting for me. And it's great to see that students thought that they got value out of it as well. Now, if you're a student listening to this and you are looking for your start in e-commerce, the exciting part is that, yes, we've got the course, we've got the 10 weeks. And if you secure one of those 20 student spots, then we get to do the course. And it looks great. We have a beautiful certificate. You'll see it on LinkedIn. You'll be able to share it with your network to say, well, I've done this, I'm ready to go. But what we've also got at eSuite is the ability then to take you, if you graduate, and connect you into our employer partners. So these are e-commerce and retail businesses who have put their hand up and said, we are looking for interns. And if they've come through the e-commerce accelerator, we know that they have a level of e-commerce foundational knowledge, and they've shown that they have the aptitude to get through 10 weeks of, pretty intense study and commitment. We want their portfolios in front of us because they're the kind of interns that we want to see. So I think that's really exciting from a student perspective looking to get into the industry. At the moment, we're going through the process of helping those students who graduated the last accelerator. And we have 4 of those students who are currently at second interview, coming up to final interview with some of our retail partners to secure their first job in e-commerce. So to me, that's where I get a lot of pride out of the program, is not so much in just delivering the content, but then being able to take you all the way through the program and see you land that first job, and then the rest is up to you. And I'm sure there's bigger and better things from there, but getting that first step in is really exciting. So that's essentially where we want to do to help grow the e-commerce talent pool in Australia. Talked a little bit about this, but this is the structure for the accelerator. Monday, I open up all the resources that are available to you. It will be the slides, the cheat sheets, everything else. There's some videos in there from industry experts. Live class on Tuesday, portfolio task due on Sunday, and then we have a community that's always available. And then we have our sponsored student spots available right now for applications. So who can apply for a free spot? It's basically university students and graduates. So if you've graduated university in a relevant degree area within the last 12 months, or you are due to graduate at the end of this upcoming semester, so at the end of 2022, you are eligible for one of the 20 free sponsored student spots in the accelerator. So we will send you the link with the follow-up email on how to apply for that. It's an online form. All you have to do is put your details in. I'm particularly interested, not so much in what you've studied, but in what your intentions are and why you want to get in, why you want your career in e-commerce. That's always the thing that I really look for. So this is the lovely certificate you get at the end that you will get at the end. But like I said, it's not certificate that counts. It's more that you are then connected and ready to go into your next job. That's the accelerator. Now, for coming along today and registering, we will be sending you one of the cheat sheets that is in the accelerator course. And this is our e-commerce news and trends, which we cover in week 1. And it's my list of some of the best e-commerce resources that are available for you if you want to get up to speed in e-commerce. So you can see it's a list of podcasts, books, websites, things you can subscribe to in order to really take your career to the next level, even if you're not working in the industry yet. Also, Tabitha has just added the link to the student application form in the chat right now. So feel free to head through, put your application in, and we will be looking to make those offers in early August. So again, the link is there. By Friday, the 29th of July, we're looking for student applications in. I'm going to pause there because I've talked.